Welcome to Cheese in Depth. I'm Michael Landis, and today we have a real special guest. We have Maize and we have Matthew with Jacobson Brichford. I'm going to turn it over to Matthew, and he's going to start us off. Matthew.
Hi, I'm Matthew. I'm the head cheesemaker at Jacobson Brichford Farmstead Cheese. That's my daughter Maisie.
I'm Maisie. I'm the middle daughter. I do a lot of work with our marketing, keeping in contact with our distributors and retailers, helping troubleshoot the website. So I'm kind of just, whatever they need me to do, I do, except for make cheese or milk cows. So that's on this guy.
She's no longer on site, so she could get away with the not milking cows, and I don't milk cows that much myself anymore, just in a pinch. We are a family business. Portions of our farm have been in my mother's family since the early 1800s. We manage a little over 1,300 acres. More than half of it's in timber, and then most of the rest is in pasture. We're 100% pasture operation, and we feed absolutely no grain to any of the ruminants. When we do have hogs or chickens, whatever, we would feed grain. We don't currently have any of them. I have been here since 1980, and I have done several different styles of farming, always trying to be on the environmental side of things. In the late 80s, I got into grass farming, rotational grazing, intensive rotational grazing. And then in 95, I built our cheese plant, which was our dairy parlor, which was the first open air New Zealand style dairy parlor in the state of Indiana. And then when I started, I had the notion to make cheese. It just took me about 17 years to get around to doing that. In 2012, we started the cheese plant. We are an all-woman-run business, except for myself. I've got 3 gals here, Tia, Carmen, and Kara, that run the farm, and I've got Amy, a new assistant cheesemaker, and Aaron, who's been with us almost since we started up at the cheese plant, and they do a pretty good job. Like I say, we're 100% grass-fed. That we do both for the environmental reasons of raising grass rather than tilling ground in this part of the world, which is kind of rolling and not necessarily the best thing. But also, if you're 100% grass, you can get an antioxidant benefit, and that's what most people are after when they talk about grass-fed. But it has to be entirely grass-fed, and so we're big on that. And it's taken a long time to learn how to manage pastures properly and to breed the cattle that will work on grass. And as far as our cattle are concerned, we have a composite breed of Normandy, Jersey, and Tarentaise, and all were breeds that we selected for attributes that would enhance cheese making. We're a little thin on the Tarentaise in the past few years, as inability to acquire genetics from France, but we're working on that. This is my folks who were my business partners until their passing, and who always supported me and doing what we were doing well. And then they encouraged me to, do what I was interested in doing, and they're a big part of why I'm where I am today. And so
and Grandma grew up on the farm, and so that's part of the connection to the land. It has been in the family for many years, but you didn't grow up there, but your predecessor did.
All my children grew up here, yeah, milking cows, and none of them live here now. So during the time from when I started the dairy to when we actually got the cheese plant built, I attended several short courses on cheese making, read quite a bit, and went to France and visited a number of farmstead operations in Normandy and Savoy, and just learned everything I could, and then kind of bounced around trying a number of different things. And then I got hooked up with Neville McNaughton from Cheese Source in St. Louis, and he really helped me get over the hump to build a place and get it going. And here we are. We started off making just 3 cheeses, the ones that we're tasting today. And we did those so that we could have a short, medium, and long aged cheese. I didn't know that much about it at the time, and so I just went at it that way. We now make 9 different cheeses. They're all raw milk, so everything has to be aged at least 60 days before we can sell it. And once again, they're all 100% grass fed. So with grass fed, whether they're 100% or not, when you get a high component of grass, you're going to see a lot more beta carotene in the cheese, and you're going to get a much yellower color in the paste of the cheese, and that really shows through in ours. Now these calves here, the ones with the white, that's a Normandy influence in there. Tarentaise look a lot like just kind of chunky jerseys. So this pin here has got a bunch of mostly Normandys. We artificially inseminate and then use jerseys for cleanup after our insemination period's over. This is our it's a New Zealand style swing parlor. You can milk over better than 100 cows an hour through that thing with 2 people. We were able to do 120 cows an hour with 2 people, but I myself could put 100 through there. I used to milk when I was selling to the co-op. I was milking 240 at one point in time, and that just wasn't going very well for us. And then we decided it was time to build a cheese plant. And on the bottom right there on that last picture, that's a 50 teat calf feeder, and that's how we feed the calves. We feed because we feed no grain. We feed the calves milk all of that first summer and into the fall, and because they need that milk fat to grow. Also, a cow, if you feed them grain, their rumen develops differently than if they were fed strictly grass. And so therefore it's important to make sure that their stomachs develop properly. But this one here is a Jersey Tarentaise cross. It's a little bull calf, but
getting some of the first tastes of grass.
Girls do a really good job of managing the calves. We try to be proactive about noticing things before they become problems. So a lot of farms are resemble more veterinary hospitals than we care to be. But on the cheeses, I was always inspired by European cheeses, and Beaufort being one of my favorites, and Everton is modeled after that. The Ameribella is like a Taleggio style, and the Briana is a Fontina. And like I said, we just started with those 3 to have different aging periods. We make a Briana with truffles, and so it's an Alpine cheese, so it gets pressed in a big block, and the curds all get pushed to the end of the vat and pressed together, and then we cut blocks out, and then we'd either throw them in the mold. But when we make the Briana with truffles, we take them like this and shred them apart with your fingers, and then mix the truffles in, and then hoop it. And that's what I'm doing there. And We are cutting. This is making Ameribella, which we make in those tubs, and they're all on a 10-minute rotation. All the steps that we have to do to that. And this is Erin, who's my weekend manager and has been with us since pretty much since we started. She's hooping Ameribella there, and it gets and that's a Mirabella curd there. It's of all of our cheeses, that curd is probably the sweetest at that point in time. The cheese doesn't end up that way. Everton, which is probably our boldest flavored cheese, doesn't taste like much on day one, but it's interesting to see what happens.
Well, with the Ameribella, you know, what you're seeing in those molds is that it's a 4x6 mold. It's not, you know, a lot of times when you'll see a cheese, you might think of it being in a round shape. Those are a 4x6, kind of like a Taleggio shape. So the molds that you see that it was going into might be a little different than what you've seen in other instances.
A lot of Taleggios are in a big paver, like a big square thing, but we chose a smaller size. Now the Ameribella is a washed rind cheese, so it gets after it's 24 hours old, it goes into the brine tank for a couple hours, and then it gets washed every day for 45 days, washed and turned. We put a little annatto in the brine in order to give it that orange color on that was just to make it look like something on a plate. And then it gets wrapped at 45 days, and then at 60 days it's ready to go out. Now I like Ameribella at any age. I've never met one too old to eat. Some people have preferences, you know, in the middle of that, but generally we have about a 90-day period after the 60 days, which is considered to be good in, but I've consumed it much older. Both the Briana and the Everton are what you consider an Alpine cheese, and that means the main thing about that is that they're cooked and that they are pressed in a block all together rather than drained and pressed individually before they go in the molds. That's in our aging room, and the inspector would like to see me wearing a hairnet and a beard net, but that's
Just for photos purposes.
the Everton end of things.
But we have two aging rooms, so maybe you want to talk about the two different ways in which we age the cheese.
This aging room is at 54 degrees, 54 to 55 degrees, about 94% humidity. And we age our Alpine cheeses there. We start some of our bloomy rinds. We'll start in this room. Some of our bloomy rinds and our softer cheeses that we make, they have to, if we put them in the Ameribella room before they're wrapped, they taste a lot like Ameribella. So we have to make sure that they're sequestered in their paper before we put them in the Ameribella room. One thing about the 60-day rule is that you have to you're taking cheeses that would normally in Europe, they might be available or in places where you can market raw milk cheese, they might be available, ready to go at 45 days. We have to get them to 60 and then still have some freshness beyond that. So putting them in a cooler room helps to do that. You cannot get it below 37 degrees or else you basically have to start the clock all over again. And so the state's pretty on top of that. so we move things around. The Ameribella goes in that colder room, which is 44 degrees. They're in there the entire time, but and same humidity in there. But we're always, you know, we like to try different things, and we every year or so we come up with something new, and have to learn how to deal with that. Right now, I'm my Adair, which I had been letting it bloom. It's modeled after a Reblochon, and so now we're trying to do a more appropriate aging process to get that where we want it. And so we'll look to the spring and see what happens with that project. But we just dried off. The 12th was our last make day, and we start calving in the middle of March. And so by the end of March, we'll be making cheese again. And we feed hay or haylage, when there's no pasture. But most years the cows are outside all the time, and they get fed hay on pasture, and in inclement weather we'll put them in a wooded area or something like that. But I'm not a big fan on keeping them housed in a barn. It's a good way to encourage respiratory problems, and we try to avoid that.
And being in southern Indiana, the level of inclement weather doesn't get, as terrible as it does in other parts of the country.
Right. Well, the traditional dairy zones developed in this country because the perennial grasses would retain their quality because they cool down at night and they didn't lose quality. Here, they tend to like perennial ryegrass and stuff. They don't do as well in the summer. We have a lot of fescue here. Fescue and orchard grass are the primary grasses that we have, and we put a lot of alfalfa and clover in with that, and keep those things pretty short. And we're able to keep pretty good quality grass most of the season. And I guess our cheeses reflect the terroir of southern Indiana, which, we're not too far from the bluegrass region. So there's a lot of calcium in the soil here, and that's got to be good for dairy production. And we don't have, snowy winters, or some years we do.
Mild though.
But this year we have had, just very little snow so far. But anyway, the cows, when I first started, I had a lot of cows that came out of confinement operations and whatever, and they just did not know how to function on grass. And as I said earlier, if they are raised on grain, they cannot digest grass efficiently. And to go solely on grass, it's a good supplement, but they can't live on it solely. And it took a lot of work to breed our way out of that. And so we have, cows that are working pretty well for us now, and it's a good. It takes time to do that, and you just can't. Feeding grain, in my opinion, it's not good for the cows. It denies you the ability to have that therapeutic dose of antioxidants, and it also it's a crutch, and it prevents you from becoming a better grazier, a grass manager. And so once you get past all that, things work out pretty well.
So in what you've been talking about, with specifically the types of breeds of cows and the grass management, I think you thought a lot about that when deciding the types of cheeses that you were going to make. So I think the next thing we were going to talk about was, the specific types of cheeses. Like Everton, how did you get started with the idea? Because I know that's kind of always been your baby. That was the first cheese you really wanted to make.
Well, yes, Everton is the community that we live near. My family's been part of this Everton community for a couple hundred years now, and It sounded like a good name for an aged cheese. But anyway, Everton is modeled after a Beaufort. It's a Gruyere style of cheese. And when the first time I had Beaufort, I was in France. And of course, you know, you're up in the mountains and it's a awe-inspiring scene and everything. And the flavor just keeps expanding. There's just flavor on top of flavor. And it just blew my mind that cheese could taste that good. and so we've done, you know, we do what we can to emulate that. It's not the same. It's Everton. It's not Beaufort, but that's was the inspiration for that. Well, the only thing I would say is that cheese making is about 85% washing dishes, and there's a lot of that, and wiping cheeses, and there's a lot of grunt work. It's not particularly sexy, and it takes, it's like driving only looking in the rear view mirror, because you make decisions. You try not to correct too many things at one time. You make decisions that you may not know for 10 months how that comes out. And so you know, as time goes by, you become a better guesser. but that's one thing. Also, you know, cheese making, we did it because we were not doing well on the farm, you know, marketing to the co-op, and just switching to cheese is not the way to save your farm. You've got the marketing. It's a competitive field, and we struggle with that all the time. I mean, our cheeses do well in competitions, but still, it's a good bit of work to get it out there. And
There are a lot of cheeses in the marketplace, and there is not necessarily a ton of knowledge about what American cheese making is bringing to the table, as opposed to a lot of the more well-known European cheeses. And so I always think that there's just an element of education, making sure people know why they need to spend a little bit more to get the cheese that is, you know, from a neighboring state, or, you know, just from the United States, and is being done with the kind of practices that we feel are important for the health of the cows, the health of the community, and, you know, to make delicious cheeses.
our farm, we pay our farm the value that we think their milk is worth, rather than paying them the commodity price. We could make cheese cheaper if we bought milk, but it wouldn't be the same cheese because it wouldn't be the same milk. And so that's very important to us. And also, you know, just, you know, I don't know exactly what percentage, but it's close to half of the dairy farms that were existent when I started are gone. And most of them were people my size or smaller. And I don't think that's really good for our food supply. And I'd like to see that trend either slow down or reverse, but I don't know.
Yeah, clearly dairy farms can't survive on commodity prices. And I think that's been shown more and more. The only people that can survive on commodity prices are these giant
well, every time there is a contraction in any particular commodity or across all of them, it ends up shrinking that much. A lot of producers go out, and then you are with this, you know, corporate cheese or whatever the commodity is. And I'm very worried about what's going to happen to the small progressive alternative farmers after this year, because this is a huge squeeze on small farms. You know, many of our fellow cheesemakers and ourselves included are doing a lot more with direct sales and lots of different things, trying to trying to roll with it this year, because nobody knows what's going on, and that's difficult. It's difficult to move the volume of cheese that we need to make, 1 pound at a time, and then FedEx and UPS, they get, it costs twice as much to ship a pound of cheese as what the cheese costs. And so that's a big challenge right now. But people need to know their farmer and appreciate the, you know, what goes into making their food, and then hopefully that, well, that would help us and other people like us.